My country is a bee.
My country is a bee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring.
Is John Zettlemoyer here this morning? Okay, let's bow our heads, please. Lord, help us remember as we walk along life's pathway that whatever we say, let it only be the truth. Whatever steps we take in life, let them build goodwill and better friendships. Whatever goals we strive to accomplish, let them be fair and beneficial to all concerned. Amen. Alexa, you have introductions. Is there yes?
Yes, I'm going to talk to the new sergeant at arms about frequent visitor points. Awarding frequent visitor points, we have with us today Jeff Lake from Allentown West.
Welcome, Jeff.
1,000 points, you get a free
I
ride.
wanted to just pass along a little bit of information that I've received about the funeral service for Pete and Barbara Roberts' daughter, Michelle. For those of you who didn't see my email, she passed away very suddenly a week ago today. Pete and Barbara immediately traveled to Vietnam. I'm not sure when they're returning. But the funeral service will be a week from this coming Saturday, February 24th at noon at St. Thomas More Church. We'll talk about this next week because typically as Rotarians, when we attend the service, we come in together. So as soon as I get more details and specifics, we'll plan that next week. But there was a card on the table. Hopefully you all signed it.
I brought an extra one with seashell because they had a summer place at New Jersey at the beach, so that would be meaningful to the husband and the kids.
Thank you, Tim. So if you came in and didn't have a chance to sign the card, let me know. I'm not sure exactly where it's at. It may still be on the table. We can pass it around. Hopefully you also saw in the newsletter the appointments of our new Sergeant at Arms and new Assistant Sergeant at Arms. Like any good employee, what did Don do on the first day on the job? He called in sick. So we are in the more than capable hands of Valerie this morning for Sergeant at Arms duty. I think you guys also hopefully are just as proud as I am that the board appointed Dale Rees as Sergeant at Arms Emeritus. Nobody deserves that more than him. So look forward to the next chapter with Mr. Blows when he finally shows up.
There she goes.
Okay. Bryce, I understand congratulations are due to you. You were named as one of the top 40 under 40 professionals in the Lehigh Valley. Congratulations.
Wow.
I also want to say thanks to the Fellowship Committee for the pancake supper event we had on Tuesday. It was a really good turnout. Way over 30 adults, almost 10 kids, I think. There was plenty of food, and I think everyone had a very nice time with Fellowship. So thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, everyone on the Fellowship Committee, for all the work you did in setting that up. Really appreciate it. You want to say a word, Bryce, about the next Fellowship event?
Just more to come. We have one coming up on Sunday, March 11th, I think it is. The 11th for the Phantoms game. It's a Sunday 5 o'clock game. You'll be seeing emails and announcements on that. And then we're starting to gear up and plan for something around the May 5th date. So more to come, but we have a lot of good ideas coming up for the springtime as well.
Thank you. Karen?
John Coons from Lily's Hope is just about. Oh, right. Do you want to say something? You're looking for.
Go ahead.
He's looking for help in moving diapers, paper products, things like that. It's not very far, is it? The moving.
Yeah, we have a new office on City Crest, so we're moving. It's more light stuff, but just need some help for a couple
So
hours.
that's Saturday, and your moving time is from 10 to 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So looking for volunteers. So that conflicts with little bit with a funeral service, does it not?
We're talking about this Saturday?
No, 22.
24.
Okay, yes, that's the same as the funeral service.
Okay, that's it.
Thanks. Dan?
I'm especially upset about Pete Roberts and his wife Barb because Pete is my sponsor. He brought me here. His wife's a good friend also, and the daughter Michelle, 43 years old. What a horrific tragedy, leaving 3 kids behind. Now I'm going to spend a minute talking about myself. I went to Sloan Kettering a week ago. Mario said, "No cancer." And he said that my pelvic mass is shrinking. And so I'm sad to leave Mario with the 6-pack abs, but I'm happy I'm going to be healthy. Yay!
Congratulations on a good report. Yeah. Thanks.
My husband said that Mario does not have 6-pack abs. We have a disagreement.
Sometimes it's best to agree to disagree. Rose, would you like to make an announcement about the International Women's Day?
So I'm hoping that everybody received the letter that was mailed to you here last week. We are looking for nominees for the Community Award. You can think of a Rotarian in our District 1 and in areas 1 and 2, if you would let Bert know with a little explanation, we'd appreciate it. We're going to be getting the award out on March the 8th, but next week is the deadline for nominees.
Thanks. And for those of you who don't know the clubs that make up each area, the Rotarian nominees for International Women's Day, we're looking for members of clubs in Area 1 and Area 2. Area 1 is our club, Allentown West, Allentown, Whitehall, and Slatington. Area 2 is Bethlehem, Bethlehem Morningstar, Easton, Nazareth, and Saucon Center Valley. So as you're thinking about women to nominate for the Rotarian part of that awards date, those are the clubs from which you would be selecting nominees. So just thought I would pass that on. I wasn't entirely clear myself on what was in it, which clubs were in Area 2. I knew some of them, but I didn't know all of them. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Okay, Steve.
I'm very happy and proud to announce that we have confirmed a event sponsor for this year's Rotary Golf Tournament. AI Orthodontics, absolutely. AI Orthodontics is committed. Thank you very much to Karen for what you're doing. So this is fantastic news to have this as early as we do, because now we can have all of our marketing goods printed already. We can start doing our raffle tickets. So we have a huge jump on being able to sell these raffle tickets, which is pure bottom line revenue. So thank you again to AI.
I want to second the thank you because I was afraid I was going to be stuck being the annual title sponsor.
Next year, Jake,
That'll
next year.
That'll cost you $1.
We're trying to negotiate a co-sponsorship. I'm sure. Jim.
Yes, so as your secretary, we're going to be having elections in March for the seats on the board of directors, and if you don't want your name on the ballot, why don't you contact me either today or email me or something. I won't be here next week, but early in March you'll see ballots come out.
Eileen.
For the Angel Network, we're doing the food bank collection until the 15th of March. Bring in instant potatoes. And I'll pack them up, and we have, the 15th is the last Thursday for the collection, because the 19th is the day they give out the food baskets.
Thank you.
Yay!
Rick.
Who is she?
Just want to quickly, Main Street Partners is again sponsoring East Penn Restaurant Week. It'll be from March 4th to March 10th, and I'll remind you every week until then. We have 19 restaurants that are going to be involved. So please, I'll give you the website, go on the website, and if you're interested, go for it.
Yay!
Okay, there's plenty of other opportunities for district events and other events in our area. They're all listed in your trumpet. Look at the section at the bottom of the newsletter, including the Foundation Gala Dinner on the 17th of March, the March 17th meeting of Rotary Leadership Institute down in King of Prussia. The district conference is coming up at the end of April. So those are all in your trumpet. Make sure you pay attention to that, please. Any other announcements from the floor? Okay, Mike, as our greeter, can you help us with the raffle today?
I can certainly help you with that. Good morning, Rotarians. Good to see everyone here this morning. Lexi, why don't you start with the first ticket here?
513, happy 13.
513 out there somewhere. Going.
Or 512.
Oh, that's just the again.
498.
Hey, it reverts to the reader on the third one.
503.
Oh, come on.
Well, I was 497. So I mean, they should have just, they should have just
That'd be extra points for being close, huh?
yeah. We were too close.
Could you repeat all those numbers?
501.
Oh,
Now we need 502.
I think so.
498.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was it. 498?
498.
Sorry.
508.
Glasses on.
There'll be
thanks, Mike.
another. There'll be
Congratulations
another.
to all the winners. Valerie, are you ready?
Hey, good morning. All right, this morning we are going to honor some changes that are happening within our club as far as Sergeant at Arms and other things. This morning I'm going to be fining Eileen, Wilmer, John Cheska, JP, Bert, Rick, and Seal, because you all sit in the same seat every week.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, boy.
She's good. Right out of the gate, aren't you? Ouch!
Where would you like me to go?
Chew on that, dog.
That's a good one.
I think you missed a few, Valerie.
Let's see, we have the usual with Chris with no pin. Lisa's leaving early. And then I noticed that I was almost blinded by Ann and Seal because they have really too many pins going on, and they got caught in the light, and I was blinded by them. Also, over here we have a guest today, right, Jeff? What is it, Jeff?
Yeah.
I think they actually spell it the same way, too.
I asked him where his name tag was, and he said, it's in my pocket. He pulls it out, and it was completely blank. So I was like, Mr. Noni, what is going on? Jeff and Jeff, LB2LB.
Don's got big shoes to fill next week.
Alright, over here, I know we got two people just sitting by themselves. We've got Mark and me, and then there's Rand here and Steve. What's going on? And then there's all this over here. This is like the party table that is just constantly getting in trouble over here.
This is the kids' table.
What's going on? We need some more distribution going on.
Where is everybody today? Where is everybody today?
Yeah, where is everybody today? What's going on? Did you guys have like a really good Valentine's Day? I want to hear really good
Yes.
Valentine's stories.
I was going to say, everybody
Maybe everybody woke up somewhere.
I did share a bed last night with a box elderbug. I thought, well, there's definitely something tickling on my leg. I thought, no, yeah, it's definitely something. So I got up and it was a box elderbug. I can't believe it.
Were we on the happy hours yet?
Okay,
I
fine.
heard you asking about Valentine's Day, so that's,
Well, that was
no,
my Valentine's Day.
no, it's not Valentine's Day.
Oh, is it better?
No, but I could, no. So I have a happy dollar because I strive for consistency in my life, so I try to make Rotary every week. But as you may or may not have noticed, I was not here last week because I went to Philadelphia for the Eagles Super Bowl victory parade, and it was everything you heard and even better, and it was awesome. And there's something uniquely sublime about being parked in the median strip at Broad and Packer Avenue at 6:45 in the morning, drinking beer, drinking beer in the street, and the cops not even bothering you or anything like that. So that was really great. And since you asked, I have a story. I always brag about Catherine, but I do have a story about James. James, who's very quiet and I think takes more after his wife's or my wife's side of the family, does have a little bit of the Rannoch smart mouth in him. There's this whole scandal going on in the 4th grade. They're cracking down on the dress code, and a bunch of boys don't wear belts. And they look like slobs because their pants are always hanging down. And they're the kids you think aren't going to wear belts. So the kids were all complaining, like, oh, you know, they sent a note home to my parents. And there's 3 of them in particular that James doesn't like. And he says, what do you guys complain about? They're like, oh, you always wear belts. You know, we got trouble. We don't have belts on. He says, you guys got nothing to worry about. They said, why is that? He says, they don't make girls wear belts in this school. Oh boy.
How about the Eagles, huh? Like,
They don't make girls wear belts in this school. It's a great line. And then they all cried and went to the teacher and said,
This is an advanced happy dollar. Next week you'd be here. We're giving you more than $1 next week because you're going to get some information on what hopefully will be the world's greatest woman field hockey player. There'll be color pictures. There will be a whole retinue of stuff. And it'll be on your table so that the things you can take home with you, and you'll be very jealous of where I am in this position. So look for next week, and JP, you will not be able to top it.
I won't even try.
Thank you.
I will defer.
Bob, you get a real kick out of it.
Yep. No, they don't kick. They use a stick.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Are you done, Bob?
Shall I say soccer?
Happy dollar for Eagles fans. Congratulations. Revel in it. It was a great game. But let's see how you do drafting the 32nd pick instead of one of the top 5 every year for 10 years in a row. It's a lot harder to stay on top than it is to get there. And public service announcement, if you have not had the flu yet, go get a flu shot. And if you get diagnosed with the flu, get on Tamiflu immediately. It will save you a lot of misery.
Do you know what the percentages are if you didn't, you know, it's like if you get it, then you've got 70% protection.
I think if you get the flu shot, you could still get the flu, but it will lessen the severity.
not true.
There's
104 fever for 4 days.
So,
Has the shot.
I'm still waiting for them to announce that there's a 50 under 50.
We'll put you in it, Steve.
I think this club needs.
So I got three happy dollars. I just had a great few days with my dad. I went down and visited him down in Florida, and this has been a couple of years now of clean out. And my dad, I guess, could be possibly labeled a hoarder. He's saved every letter ever written to him from his family when he was in University of Arizona. I went through all of the sympathy cards for both my grandfather and grandmother's death. I mean, it was crazy. But a lot of the stuff is from the old stores that we had in Emmaus. But this one was interesting to me. I brought it home. This is an article from 1970, March 18th, 1970, of the Rotary Anns. And the first person I talked to when I came in was Wilmer, and it was really interesting because the women that are pictured in this picture were Minera Stortz, Minnie Laudenslager, Hattie Hauser, and it turns out that Hattie Hauser's husband was Wilmer's sponsor into Rotary. May Lichtenwalder, who was my aunt, and a woman named Adelaide Weaver. But the Rotary Anns, for those of you who don't know, used to meet. They were an auxiliary crew of Rotary, and they used to meet once a month at the Grange down here in Macungie. So I've been relishing in stuff like this and brown paper articles for a couple of days, but neat stuff. If I find anything more about Rotary, I'll bring it in.
Don't you think the Emmaus Press might be interested in that?
They might be. I mean, 1970 is still, it's not like it's I guess that's old.
To try to match JP and Bob at my table here, I figure I better talk about my daughter. Last night late, I received a press release from a buddy of mine down in Annapolis, Maryland. And my daughter goes to school at the University of Maryland, for those who don't know. And I'll just read the press release real quickly here. This year's Gingrich recipients, Gingrich is an award down at the University of Maryland, is Rachel Wills and Sarah Young. Congratulations to these brilliant young ladies. Over this past summer, Rachel participated in a research scholar program at Lehigh Valley Health Network, where she conducted numerous research and shadowed numerous physicians. In addition, she resumed volunteering at Peaceable Kingdom, an animal rescue shelter for which she has been involved for the past 6 years. While at the University of Maryland, she's an executive board member for the Biomedical Engineering Society and will soon begin volunteering at a local hospital. The press release is a little old. She's already volunteering. Post-graduation, Rachel plans to attend medical school and aspires to become an emergency room medicine physician. So that was fun.
I'll see the front table and raise them 10.
Oh, boy.
Our son, Brian, is attending medical school at the University of Pennsylvania. He's in his second half of his second year. 2 weeks ago, he delivered his first baby.
Hey!
I probably make an announcement in a couple weeks when he comes home safe, but my nephew, Ian, is going for his PhD at Cornell, and he is in Nairobi right now. He is teaching computer something to people in Nairobi, students, and there's also refugee camps, and he's been sending Instagram pictures. He's a brave fellow because there's a lot there, including malaria, and I don't know that you can, get a shot for that. So it's interesting. I think he wants to one-up my brother-in-law who's traveled the world. I think he just, has it in him. Yeah, so I might ask if he, I don't think he would, but it would be neat for him to speak.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Talk to Mr. Gould, he is our program chair.
Talk to,
Sunday,
so today,
I turned 52 on Sunday and had a very relaxing afternoon, and wasn't going to say anything, but when Larry mentioned about the Eagles, I thought, well, I'd just reminisce a little bit. So I was just watching videos of the Super Bowl on YouTube and was really enamored with the Philly special, which was a snap to the undrafted running back who pitched it to the undrafted tight end who threw it to the backup quarterback. When our quarterback catch, as you all know. So just a phenomenal game.
Our quarterback's like 7.
He went down there. I had thoughts about it. Your family members go down, but I heard it was, quite an event. So,
Fly,
congrats.
Eagles, fly.
Something like that.
Bob, what?
I have to make a mention of the Eagles. I didn't go do it, but we're doing, right after they won the NFC champion, I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and bought this hat. It says Champions NFC on it. So I went to the day after the Super Bowl because I wanted to get the Super Bowl hat. They have the same hat, same everything, except instead of NFC, it says Super Bowl champs. This hat was $22. The Super Bowl hat, same hat, was $40. I said, you guys are a ripoff. I said, these hats are all made in China anyway. How could it be $18 more? They said, well, no, that's what we got to charge for it. I says, thank you very much. I'll get one somewhere else. Unbelievable.
Price of success.
Price of
There were
success.
lots of guys walking around the parade with duffel bags across their shoulders. So anything you want from that.
Okay.
I have my own happy dollars to share this morning. My daughter, my oldest, you may recognize her by her smile.
They both smile.
They both smile, but yeah, smile. She entered a video contest and won free Invisalign treatment. Wow. She had her first consult, was a couple days ago, and we were referred to Dr. Fry. He was very interested in what was going on at Dr. Isa's office and all that. I'm going to tell you more about that later. Anyway, turns out she had x-rays done, no wisdom teeth. This child has no wisdom teeth. I'm so envious of her because not only does she get free Invisalign, she's she's got it pretty easy after that. So yeah.
Wow, brilliant.
Mail, we're all set? Okay, I'll be around. Happy Dollar Signs.
Okay, without further ado, I will hand the microphone to Steve Gould to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Our speaker today is one of our own, Mr. Chris Wills with Miller Searles. He has very quickly filled a vacant spot for today's talk. So first, I want to thank you very much for stepping up quickly to do this. But he is going to talk to us about an extremely exciting subject that affects us all. Mr. Wills?
Thanks, Steve. I don't know if I call taxes exciting, but it is what it is. Because we have a relatively small audience, if anybody has any questions, feel free to wave me down, raise your hand, whatever's necessary, go over whatever questions you have. First, I want to start by saying, I'm sure you all know this, but back in December, our president signed new tax legislation. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 provided numerous changes both on the individual side and the business side. It's probably the most sweeping changes in the last 30 years plus. Today I'm going to go over just the individual provisions that changed, or some of those changes, most of which are effective in 2018, although I'm going to mention one area where there's actually is a change for 2017. Again, I just want to go over the individual side of these of the changes. A lot of changes on the business side. Today we're just going to focus on the individual side. First and foremost, the legislation or the act provides lower tax rates. Prior to 2018, the highest tax rate was 39.6%, which has been in place for about 7 or 8 years now. Beginning in 2018, the highest rate drops to 37%. To show you the impact of the lower rates, on $100,000 of taxable income, and now taxable income is basically your gross income less deductions. $100,000 of taxable income for a married taxpayer, the average rate in 2018 will fall by about 2 to 3%, about 2%, which will provide savings about $1,000 to $2,000. On $200K of taxable income for a married taxpayer in 2018, the rate savings will be about 3%, which equates to about $3,000 of savings. One other comment with respect to the lower tax rates, the brackets have also changed. And what I mean by that is each level of income is taxed at lower brackets, I should say. Each bracket of income is much larger so that the effective rate becomes smaller. In so doing, the marriage tax penalty has been done away with. And what I mean by that, or for those who don't know, the marriage tax penalty basically means that two individuals who earn roughly the same amount will pay more in tax as a married taxpayer than they would as two separate individual taxpayers. Again, with the act, the marriage tax penalty has been done away with for all but the highest two brackets, which basically is $400,000 of taxable income and above. Let's talk about the state and local tax deduction. I'm sure you may have heard this in the news. This is one of the areas which got a lot of media time. Prior to 2018, state and local taxes, including the taxes you pay to Pennsylvania, your local earned income taxes, real estate taxes were fully deductible. Beginning in 2018, that deduction is capped at $10,000. One of the comments that I want to make here is, if you were subject to the alternative minimum tax, and that's beyond the scope of today, but if you were unlucky enough to be subject to that tax in years prior to 2018, you didn't get a deduction for your state and local taxes. So this change, capping that deduction at $10,000 in and of itself, if you were subject to the alternative minimum tax, won't cause a tax increase. The mortgage interest deduction. There was a lot of changes here, and some will be more applicable than others. Prior to 2018, the cap on the mortgage interest deduction was limited to mortgages not in excess of $1 million. Effective December 15th of 2017, if you got a mortgage after that date That cap is now $750,000. Quite frankly, that change will impact some, but not too many people, hopefully. Where there will be a bigger change is home equity, the interest on home equity loans. Effective 2018, the interest on home equity loans is no longer deductible. Just so we're clear here, for this purpose, a home equity loan is defined as a loan where the proceeds were used for something other than improving your residence. So if you go out and use a home equity loan to buy a car, guess what? If that interest is incurred in 2018, it's no longer deductible. One comment that I'll make here is mortgages in place prior to December 15th of last year are grandfathered in. So if you had a mortgage balance of $800,000 as of December 15th of 2017, that interest is fully deductible, even though the new cap now is lower than that threshold. Miscellaneous itemized deductions. Miscellaneous itemized deductions include unreimbursed employee business expenses if your employer isn't reimbursing you expenses incurred on the job. It includes investment advisor fees. It includes tax prep fees. In 2017 and earlier tax years, those items were deductible to the extent that in total they exceeded 2% of your gross income. Effective 2018, those items are no longer deductible. Medical expenses. Medical expenses is one area where the actual change was effective in 2017. For 2017, medical expenses were to be deductible only to the extent for all taxpayers that they exceeded 10% of your gross income. As the bills were being tossed about in the fall, they discussed reducing that threshold, and they did. They reduced the threshold back down to 7.5% for 2017 and 2018 only. So the old rule was 7.5%. Effective 2017, it was scheduled to rise to 10%. With the new legislation, it went back to 7.5% for last year, 2017, and 2018. But effective 2019, it's going back up to 10% again. Personal exemptions. Basically, on a tax return for you, your spouse, your children, and any other dependents, prior to 2018, you were entitled to a personal exemption deduction. For 2017, that was $4,100 per person. So yourself, your spouse, 2 children, that would have been a deduction of around just over $16,000. Beginning in 2018, no deductions for personal exemptions. Again, we'll go back to the alternative minimum tax, or AMT. If you were unlucky enough to be subject to that, you didn't get the benefit of a personal exemption deduction. So this change in and of itself, if you were subject to AMT, isn't going to cause a tax increase. Standard deduction. If you didn't itemize your deductions, you took what was known as the standard deduction. For a single taxpayer, that deduction was $6,500 in 2017. For a married taxpayer, it was $13,000. With the Act, effective 2018, those standard deduction amounts effectively or nearly double. Single taxpayers, it goes up to $12,000. Married taxpayers, it goes up to $24,000. Quick comment here. Basically, the IRS publishes certain results related to tax returns. I think the most recent year available is 2013 or 2014, if I'm not mistaken. For that year, again, 2013 or 2014, roughly 30% of all taxpayers itemize their deductions. Probably in Pennsylvania, that number is even a little bit higher because real estate taxes tend to be a little bit higher in the Northeast than they are throughout the country. So I would venture to guess that in Pennsylvania it was a little higher than 30% of all taxpayers itemize their deductions. With the increase in the standard deduction, with the cap on the deduction for state and local taxes, it's anticipated that far fewer people will itemize their deductions. So if there is an area of simplification in the new law, what could arise from all these changes is more people are taking a standard deduction, so you don't have to keep track of your mortgage interest, your real estate tax payments, charity, etc. The one estimate that I saw floated about is approximately 15% of all taxpayers will itemize. I alluded to the alternative minimum tax a couple times already, but let's talk a little bit about that. The alternative minimum tax had an exemption amount, which was relatively low and phased out over relatively small levels of income. With the act, or with the new legislation, that AMT exemption amount is scheduled to rise significantly, and the phase-out range for that exemption or that deduction is much, much higher. What should happen here, again, this is an area where whether they intended it or not, there's some simplification. With the increase in the exemption, in all likelihood, far fewer people will be subject to the alternative minimum tax. So if you're doing your own taxes, that should help a little bit. There's some big changes with respect to, yes?
And I know you're just talking about tax, but from a tax return point of view, if they were trying to cut taxes and give breaks and make it simplified, why didn't they just do away with the alternative minimum tax?
That's a great question. They talked about that, and the long and short of it is, the way that tax works, there was more collections from the alternative minimum tax than there was from the regular tax. So if they did away with it completely, they were losing too much funds. The original House bill last year, which passed in November, which was not ultimately agreed to by the Senate, was going to do away with the AMT for individuals. They realized they were losing too much revenue, so they had to keep it back in the law. They scaled it back significantly, but they kept it in the law. So great question. They did away with the alternative minimum tax for corporations. So there was some discussions. They were losing too much revenue. That's what it really came down to. Good question. Alimony. Here's another area which was never discussed, or at least I never saw discussions concerning changes to alimony, but the House bill, which passed in November, included changes to alimony, and I'll get to why they were included in a second, but let me at least go over the provisions. Alimony today, as we speak, or I should say prior to the new legislation, deductible by the payor spouse, taxable to the recipient. Effective for separation agreements or divorce decrees entered into after 12/31/2018. So if you get divorced in 2019, the new law is such that alimony is no longer deductible and it's no longer taxable to the recipient. So if you have a divorce agreement in place by December 31st of this year, you're grandfathered in, so your payments in 2018 or 19 will still be deductible, but any new agreements after the first or after December 31st of this year, no longer deductible.
So get a divorce now.
I didn't say that, Mark.
Chris,
yes.
so what's the idea behind that?
Yeah, great question. At the end of the day, without getting too technical, they needed to keep the bill within certain parameters as to how much revenue they could lose. Obviously, with the tax reduction, the amount of tax revenues anticipated to go down without getting into all the particulars. They needed to keep it below a certain threshold amount. The idea with changing it is they needed a way to raise revenue. In effect, what happens now is one party gets the deduction, one party gets the income, so you would think on the surface it's somewhat revenue neutral. It's not. Generally, the payor is in a higher tax bracket, the recipient is in a lower bracket, so the IRS loses on that rate differential. They needed a way to pay for this, and that's one of the small ways that they're paying for this. The other small ways, we talked about losing some of these deductions. That's also why they're doing away with these deductions. It's not for simplification, it's to raise some revenue. Let's talk about 529 plans. 529 plans, that references an area of the tax code, are really education savings accounts. And the way those accounts work is you put dollars into those plans. It's non-deductible for federal taxes. It is deductible for PA.
You put money into those plans, you let it sit there, and you pull the funds out of the plan to the extent that, prior to the law, to the extent that you used it for college expenses, room and board and tuition, any gains inside the plan were not subject to tax. The change here in the law, and actually I think this is a pretty good change, is you can begin to use those 529 accounts for elementary or private elementary costs in private secondary schools, private high schools. Now there, the limitation is $10,000 per year per student. For the college, there's no limit. Yes, JP?
I just want to comment, as a guy whose kids go to parochial, you would be amazed how many people out there think this now means their tuition is tax deductible.
Yeah.
I've talked to a ton of, I'm like, the only deductible is what you made over the last year between when you put the money in. But people literally think that this means parochial school tuition.
Yeah, it's not, but there, and I just spoke to an individual this week. He's got 6 figures that have built up in this account, and his oldest is now 16, 17. He was going to use it for college, for her costs. He's got a younger one that's still in high school. He's pulling out $10,000. That funds have been sitting there for years, and with the run-up in the market, there's some substantial gains inside those accounts. So in effect, he's able to take the gains inside that account on the $10,000 distribution and keep it out of income. So there is some benefits. It's not creating a deduction for the tuition cost, though. Some other smaller items, but they do come into play. Itemized deductions. Prior to 2018, once gross income got over a threshold amount, and for 2017, that threshold amount was roughly $300,000 of gross income, a little over 300. All of your deductions, your mortgage interest, your real estate taxes, your charity taxes to PA, started to be phased out. And it was for every dollar over that threshold amount, you'd lose 3% of your itemized deductions. Whether you realized it or not, in effect, some of your mortgage interest wasn't being deducted. That was known as the peace limitation. That limitation is no longer effective in 2018 and beyond. Again, now your mortgage interest is subject to those limitations that we talked about earlier, no longer subject to limitations. And charity. Pass-through entities and sole proprietorships. This is an area where, quite frankly, I could have spent all day talking about. It's an area that provides some huge benefits if you meet certain criteria. For pass-through entities, which is partnerships, S corporations, and sole proprietorships, in effect, you're going to pay taxes on 80% of your net income effective in 2018. Now, there's some limitations. The first limitation is generally that deduction, or a 20% deduction, is not available to service businesses. And the way that service businesses is defined here, it's not to include engineers and architects, and there's a reason for that. But so service businesses, generally accountants, lawyers, physicians, not eligible for that deduction. And it's not on your wages, it's on the income from as a sole proprietor or income from a business that you may be a partner in. However, even service businesses are eligible for that deduction if if taxable income is less than, it's roughly $315,000 for a married couple. So you're under $315,000 of taxable income for a married couple, even a service business can take advantage of that deduction. The last area that I want to go over today is with respect to child tax credits. And this is an area overlooked, but I think it's going to come into play a lot more going forward. Prior to 2018, for every child under age 17, you were entitled to a credit of $1,000. Now, a credit is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your tax, as opposed to a deduction, which saves you at whatever tax bracket you're in. That credit was phased out once for a married couple, once taxable income, I should say, was over $110,000. So if you're over $110,000, you started to lose that credit, $1,000 per child. The new law, and actually I think this is a real nice area that has been overlooked, that hasn't got a lot of media attention, but I think it should. That credit has been raised from $1,000 per child to $2,000 per child. In addition, the phase-out range, instead of beginning at 110,000, jumps all the way up to 400,000. So you're under 400,000, in this case it's gross income, you're under 400,000 of gross income, you have 3 children, that's a $6,000 reduction in your tax. Under the old law, if you were at close to 400, it would have been 0, because the old credit of $1,000 per child would have been phased out. Any questions?
I just have a question.
Sure.
That's a good one, Dave.
I don't know if this is correct or I just heard along the way. If you have a tax due of 0, are you still eligible to get the credit, or is it not allowed because you didn't have a tax liability?
Refundable credit. Credits, in some cases, that's a great question. Some credits are what's known as refundable credits. And what that means is if you have enough deductions that eliminates all of your tax, so your tax goes down to 0, can you still get the benefit of that credit afterwards? Some are refundable, some are not. I believe, and don't hold me to this, I believe that some of this credit is refundable. I don't think the entire amount is, but I believe with this one, some of it is refundable.
You don't think Liberty Tax Services and H&R Block would have let them get rid of that, do you?
That's a good question. I'm going to stay out of that stuff. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Chris, one of the criticisms that was heard when the new tax act was signed is that it primarily benefits the wealthy. From where you sit, how do you react to that? What do you think?
Whether you realize it or not, that's a loaded question, but let me at least put some numbers to it. I said earlier that 100,000 of taxable income for a married couple, that could be 2 spouses working, earning 60,000 apiece. They have some deductions, which brings it down to 50,000 apiece. So 100,000 of taxable income. The savings could be $1,000 to $2,000. You throw, if they have a couple kids in there, that their old credit was $1,000, now it's $2,000 apiece. That's some significant savings at relatively low levels of income. Now let me change it up a little bit. I just did for a friend of mine from college, lives in the city, New York City. Between him and his spouse, they make roughly $400 to $500, but extremely high. They own an apartment in the city, so extremely high real estate taxes, extremely high state and local taxes, which are now capped at $10,000. His savings at roughly $400,000 to $500,000 of income are in the $7,000 to $8,000 range, maybe a little bit higher. As a percentage of their income, it's smaller than the individual in Pennsylvania earning the $100,000 in my first example. So I can, pure dollar amounts, the wealthier are getting more. But as a percentage of their income, I'm not convinced it's that much greater. And I know that's a long answer to your short question. But Lex, I think you have a question.
Are you aware if the decent law rule got changed?
I'm sorry?
Are you aware if the decent law rule got changed?
What's the decent law? I gotta be honest with you.
Lets clergy deduct housing expenses.
Lex, I know there was talk of making changes there. I don't know what came in the final provision. I'm still worried about my 2017 tax returns for my clients, so I'm only now starting to get into the law a little bit, but that's a great question. If you'd like, I can follow up for you and I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Bye.
You didn't talk about the estate tax changes. Can you just hit that in 30 seconds?
Real broad strokes for individuals with estates of $5 million or more pre-act, they would be subject to the estate tax. The estate tax rates, for those who don't know, I think now the rule was roughly 45% and up. So very high tax once you were over that $5 million threshold. Going forward, that $5 million threshold was raised to $10 million. And remember, if you're married, it's $10 million for husband, $10 million for spouse. So it's really $20 million with proper planning you can get out of having a taxable federal estate. Now, my only comment there is, a couple comments I should say. One, very few estate tax returns are actually filed now. So we're not talking about an impact to a large number of people throughout the country. That's one. And the reason why I say that is the people that are over that threshold are doing things to get property out of their estate. 2, though, that's the federal side. Pennsylvania is a very low threshold for inheritance taxes. Pennsylvania's threshold, without getting into all the specifics, the rates are much smaller, but very small estates are subject to the Pennsylvania inheritance tax. So the rates generally range, I think, from 3% up to 15% without getting into specifics. So by and large, a lot of estates won't be subject to federal estate taxes, but you still have to be concerned with PA. So.
But the law expires this increase in 8 years or something. Right?
Yeah, great question. Almost everything I talked about today, with very few exceptions, has a sunset date of, I think, 2025. The reason is, it goes back to my comment earlier, once you get over certain thresholds as far as how much revenue loss there would be, it required, actually I can tell you, it required a larger, I think they needed 60 votes in the Senate to get it passed. They didn't want to go that route because they weren't going to get 60 votes. So the way to keep the loss in revenue below those threshold amounts is all of these provisions that I talked about today sunset after 2024, I think 2024, 2025. So the loss in revenue ends at that date, keeps it under the threshold. Same with the estate tax.
So it's all up for renegotiation in 8 years?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. Jeff?
I just want to make one comment to Bob on the estate tax. It's really important to keep the estate tax and not give it up, because when you have an estate tax, you also have what's called step-up in basis, which means if you have a low-price stock that you hold, if you die, the value is stepped up to your date of death. If you get rid of the estate tax, you also get rid of step-up in basis. At least that's the way we understand it.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a great point. You know, in effect, what happens there is you own stocks and bonds and other investments. If it runs through an estate, the new cost becomes the fair market value as of date of death. So the recipients of that property, if they sell it the next day, don't have a capital gains tax to pay. There was talk of doing away with the estate tax and even including some step up there. It didn't come to fruition, but Jeff, great point there. Any other questions? Yes?
Any change in the capital gains tax?
None. The one comment that I'll have there is capital gains, for those who don't know, I said earlier, the highest rates now go as high, or did, I should say, go as high as 39.6%. Now it's 37%. Capital gains, other than higher income taxpayers, without getting into those specifics, 15% for long-term gains. Short-term gains are taxed like other sources of income. They kept everything the same there. There were some discussions about changing that. Everything stayed there. With ordinary rates coming down and capital gains staying the way they were, there's not as much benefit, but there's still a benefit under the new law of having capital gains versus ordinary gains. Other questions? Well, thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, our numbers have dwindled. Look around, and if you see members that are missing, we have a lot of snowbirds, we have a lot of people who are ill, we have a lot of people who are probably out of town. Pick up the phone and call somebody that you haven't seen here for a couple of weeks and just say, hey, we missed you. The last couple of weeks of numbers have been a little depressing, so maybe we can boost the numbers a little bit by just reaching out. Next week's meeting is a classification talk by Rose. I'm looking forward to that. And for any board members who are still here, remember next week is a board meeting. Let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, you're not getting it. Yeah, I'll send an email to say, hold on, and I'll check.